Bilionario was taking his fiancée home, until he saw his ex crossing the crosswalk with twins. Welcome to Secrets Narrated. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. When the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10 and share what you felt along the way. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with twists and hidden truths, make sure to follow Secrets Narrated so you don't miss the next one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy every detail. Adrian Cole adjusted his platinum Rolex as he guided his midnight black Aston Martin through the winding streets of downtown Seattle. The late afternoon sun cast golden streaks across the leather interior, illuminating the woman beside him. Cassandra Wells, 28, blonde hair perfectly styled in loose waves, designer sunglasses perched elegantly on her nose. She was everything he thought he wanted now. Beautiful, independent, uncomplicated. The restaurant has a 2-month waiting list, Cassandra said, checking her reflection in the visor mirror. I still can't believe you got us a table for tonight. Adrian smiled, his steel gray eyes focused on the road ahead. At 40, he had learned that money could buy almost anything, including spontaneity. His dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, caught the light as he turned toward her. Perks of owning renewable energy contracts with half the city. Cassandra laughed, the sound light and carefree. You make it sound so simple. Simple. That's exactly what Adrian had wanted his life to become. After years of complicated relationships, demanding schedules, and emotional expectations he couldn't meet, simplicity felt like luxury. His relationship with Cassandra was 3 months old, long enough to enjoy her company, short enough to avoid serious conversations about the future. The traffic light ahead turned red, and Adrian brought the car to a smooth stop. His phone buzzed with work notifications, but he ignored them. Friday evenings were sacred now, reserved for dinner dates, art galleries, and conversations that never ventured into territory he wasn't willing to explore. I love how relaxed you are these days, Cassandra said, reaching over to touch his hand. When we first met, you seemed so intense. Adrian's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Intense. That's what his previous relationship had taught him about himself, that he was too focused on work, too unavailable, too resistant to the kind of domestic life that others craved. The breakup had been painful but necessary, a clean cut that allowed both parties to find what they actually wanted. I've learned to appreciate the moment, he said, meaning it. No more pressure about weekend plans that stretched months ahead. No more discussions about holiday traditions he had no interest in creating. No more hints about engagement rings or family dinners that made him feel trapped. The crosswalk ahead filled with evening pedestrians, office workers heading home, couples hand in hand, teenagers laughing as they navigated the busy intersection. Adrian watched them absently, his mind already shifting to the wine list at the restaurant, when something made him focus. A woman was crossing the street, moving carefully through the crowd. She carried something against her chest. No, 2 somethings. Babies. Twins, from the look of it, bundled in soft blue and pink blankets. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she moved with the cautious precision of someone carrying precious cargo. Adrian's breath caught. Even from a distance, even with her head down, he knew that profile. The gentle curve of her neck, the way she held her shoulders, the careful, deliberate way she walked. Lena Hart, his ex-fiancée, the woman he had left exactly 1 year and 1 month ago. Lena paused in the middle of the crosswalk as one of the babies began to fuss. She shifted them both to one arm and gently stroked the crying infant's face with her free hand. Her lips moved. She was singing, Adrian realized, or humming something soothing. The baby quieted almost immediately, and she continued across the street. Adrian? Cassandra's voice seemed to come from far away. The light's green. He blinked, realizing he had been staring. Cars behind him were waiting. Lena had disappeared into the crowd on the other side of the street, but the image burned in his mind. Babies. Twin babies who looked to be about 4 months old. Adrian's hands trembled as he pressed the accelerator. 1 year and 1 month ago when they broke up, Lena hadn't mentioned being pregnant, but the timing would be exactly right. You look like you've seen a ghost, Cassandra said, studying his face with concern. Do you know that woman? Adrian kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing. Had Lena been pregnant when they separated? Had she known and chosen not to tell him? Or had she discovered it afterward and made the decision to handle it alone? The questions multiplied, each one more unsettling than the last. But underneath them all was a single devastating realization. The woman he had thought he knew completely had become a mother. She was raising 2 children, possibly his children, without him, and she had looked content, peaceful, like someone who had found exactly what she was meant to be doing. "Adrian? Sorry," he managed, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about work." But he wasn't thinking about work. He was thinking about the conversation they'd had the night before their breakup, when Lena had mentioned wanting to start a family someday. He had been honest, brutally honest, about his lack of interest in children. He had told her he couldn't give her the domestic life she wanted, that he needed freedom to focus on building his empire. She had listened quietly, nodded, and the next morning she had agreed that they weren't compatible long-term. It had been the most mature breakup of his life. No screaming, no accusations, no attempts to change each other's minds. Just 2 people acknowledging that they wanted different things and having the courage to walk away. But now seeing her with those babies, Adrian wondered if mature had actually meant devastatingly lonely. He pulled into the restaurant's valet parking, his hands still unsteady. Cassandra was already checking her lipstick, excited about their evening ahead. She represented everything he thought he had chosen: beauty without complications, companionship without expectations, pleasure without responsibility. So why did his chest feel hollow? Why did the image of Lena humming to those babies make his carefully constructed simple life feel suddenly, terrifyingly empty? As he handed his keys to the valet, one question echoed in his mind. What if the life he had been so determined to avoid was the only one worth living? What would you have done in Adrian's position? Told Lena immediately about seeing her? Or tried to forget and move forward with your new life? Lena Hart shifted baby Oliver to her left arm as she unlocked the door to her modest 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. The late afternoon light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft shadows across the hardwood floors she had refinished herself during her pregnancy. Baby Emma stirred against her chest, making the soft mewing sounds that meant she would need feeding soon. The apartment was nothing like the penthouse she had shared with Adrian. No floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, no marble countertops, no smart home technology that responded to voice commands. But it was hers. Every piece of furniture chosen carefully, every corner arranged with purpose. The pale yellow walls reflected her belief that children should grow up surrounded by warmth, not cold luxury. She settled both babies into their shared bassinet, a decision born of necessity rather than choice. Oliver immediately reached for his sister's hand, their tiny fingers intertwining in the way that never failed to make Lena's heart ache with fierce protectiveness. 4 months. 4 months of sleepless nights, of learning to change 2 diapers simultaneously, of singing lullabies at 3 in the morning while bouncing babies who seemed to take turns refusing sleep. 4 months of a love so intense it sometimes left her breathless. 4 months of not once regretting her decision to keep Adrian's paternity a secret. Lena moved to the kitchen, a compact space where she had learned to prepare formula bottles with mechanical precision. The refrigerator was covered with appointment cards, pediatrician visits, vaccination schedules, mommy and me classes she couldn't afford but attended anyway, because Emma and Oliver deserved every opportunity. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Claire. "Coffee tomorrow? I can bring bagels." Lena smiled as she typed back, "If you don't mind baby chaos. They're going through a crying phase." Claire's response was immediate. "Babies cry, sisters listen. See you at 10. This was Lena's support system now. Her younger sister, her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, who sometimes watched the babies when Lena had job interviews, and Dr. Sarah Kim, the pediatrician who had become something close to a friend. A small circle, but solid. People who showed up without being asked, who understood that love sometimes meant accepting help gracefully. She tested the formula temperature against her wrist, remembering how Adrian used to tease her about being overly cautious. "You check restaurant reviews like you're planning military strategy," he had said once, laughing as she researched their anniversary dinner location for weeks in advance. He hadn't understood that careful planning wasn't anxiety. It was love. It was caring enough about outcomes to put in the work beforehand. Emma's cry pierced the quiet, followed immediately by Oliver's sympathetic wails. Lena moved with practiced efficiency, scooping them both up and settling into the rocking chair that had been her grandmother's. The chair creaked softly as she began to feed Emma, while Oliver nestled against her shoulder, his cries subsiding into contented snuffles. This was the moment she had feared most during pregnancy, the overwhelming responsibility of caring for two lives entirely dependent on her. But instead of drowning, she had discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Every sleepless night, every doctor's appointment managed alone, every milestone celebrated with no one but her babies as witness. Each experience had built something unshakable inside her. Her phone rang. For a wild moment her heart stuttered, imagining it might be Adrian. But the caller ID showed her boss from the marketing firm where she worked part-time remotely. "Lena, I know it's after hours, but the Johnson account just came back with revision requests. Any chance you could handle them this weekend?" Lena looked at the babies in her arms, at the laundry basket overflowing in the corner, at the stack of bills on her kitchen counter that she would tackle after the babies were asleep. "Of course," she said. "Send them over. You're amazing. I don't know how you manage it all." Neither do I sometimes, Lena thought. But what she said was, "You do what you have to do." After hanging up, she continued rocking, watching the way the light changed across her babies' faces. Oliver had Adrian's straight nose and strong jawline, already visible even at 4 months. Emma had inherited Lena's green eyes and stubborn chin. They were beautiful, healthy, and completely unaware that their father was one of the wealthiest men in the Pacific Northwest. Lena had Googled Adrian exactly once since their breakup. The search results showed him at charity galas, renewable energy conferences, and society events, always impeccably dressed, usually with an attractive woman on his arm. He looked successful, confident, and entirely unencumbered by the kind of domestic responsibilities that defined Lena's days. She had closed the laptop and never searched again. The decision to keep the pregnancy secret hadn't been made lightly. For weeks after discovering she was carrying twins, Lena had crafted and deleted dozens of text messages to Adrian. She had driven to his office building 3 times, sitting in the parking lot while she rehearsed conversations that always ended the same way, with him offering financial support but not emotional investment, or worse, suggesting solutions that didn't align with what she wanted for her children. Adrian had been honest about not wanting children. He had never pretended otherwise, never given her false hope. The breakup had been initiated by him, but it had been mutual in the end because they both recognized the fundamental incompatibility. So why would a pregnancy change that? Lena had chosen to believe that forcing someone to be a father was no gift to anyone, especially not to the children involved. Emma and Oliver deserved parents who chose them wholeheartedly, not someone fulfilling an obligation. As if sensing her thoughts, Oliver opened his dark eyes, so much like Adrian's, and gazed at her with the solemn attention babies sometimes displayed. Lena traced his tiny eyebrow with her finger. "I made the right choice," she whispered to him. "Someday you'll understand." But even as she said it, a small voice in her mind wondered if protection could sometimes be another word for selfishness. Was she really protecting her children from an unwilling father, or was she protecting herself from potential rejection? The sun had set completely now, and the apartment was filled with the soft shadows that marked the beginning of another long night. Lena stood carefully, settling both babies back in their bassinet, and moved to close the blinds. Through the window she could see the city lights twinkling in the distance, including the gleaming tower where Adrian's company occupied the top 3 floors. For just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like if things had been different. If he had wanted the same things she did. If somewhere in that tower he was thinking about her too. But fantasies were dangerous when you had real lives depending on you. Lena pulled the blinds closed and turned away from the window, away from the life that might have been, and toward the life she had chosen to build alone. Adrian couldn't taste the Wagyu beef, the wine, a 1998 Chateau Margaux worth more than most people's monthly salary, might as well have been water. Across from him, Cassandra was describing her latest photography project, her eyes animated as she gestured with her fork, but her words felt like background noise. All he could see were those 2 small bundles in Lena's arms. "You're completely somewhere else," Cassandra said, setting down her glass with a soft clink. "Should I be offended?" Adrian forced his attention back to her. Cassandra wore a black silk dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her blonde hair catching the candlelight. 3 months ago, when they'd met at a renewable energy summit in Vancouver, he had been immediately drawn to her confidence, her independence, her complete lack of neediness. She was a successful photographer with her own gallery, her own apartment, her own life that intersected with his without depending on it. Everything he thought he wanted. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. Long day. You know how it is with the Portland contract negotiations. She studied his face with the same intensity she brought to capturing the perfect shot. This isn't about work. I can tell the difference between your stressed face and your confused face. This is definitely confused. Adrian almost smiled despite himself. Cassandra's directness was one of the things he appreciated about her. No games, no fishing for information she wanted. If she had a question, she asked it. There was someone I recognized earlier, he said carefully. Someone I haven't seen in a while. An ex? Yes. Cassandra leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine thoughtfully. The ex? The one you were with for 2 years before we met? Adrian nodded. He had mentioned Lena briefly early in their relationship, the way people do when explaining their romantic history. Nothing detailed, just the basic facts. They had wanted different things. The breakup had been amicable. They hadn't spoken since. And seeing her brought up feelings? It brought up questions. Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, and Adrian could practically see her weighing her response. This was exactly the kind of emotional complexity he had been trying to avoid in his post-Lena life. Cassandra had every right to be upset, to demand explanations, to make this about their relationship. Instead, she surprised him. Do you want to talk about it? I'm not sure there's anything to talk about yet. But you think there might be? Adrian met her eyes. I don't know. Cassandra nodded slowly. Okay. Well, when you figure it out, let me know if it affects us. It was exactly the kind of mature, non-possessive response that had attracted him to her in the first place. No jealousy, no demands for immediate answers, no attempt to control his process. Just acceptance that people have histories that sometimes resurface unexpectedly. So why did her understanding make him feel lonelier than if she had gotten angry? They finished dinner making small talk about her upcoming exhibition and his company's expansion into offshore wind farms. Professional topics that felt safe, familiar. When he dropped her off at her Queen Anne apartment, she kissed him lightly on the cheek. Take care of yourself, she said. Whatever this is, don't let it eat you alive. Adrian drove home to his penthouse in Belltown, but instead of going upstairs, he found himself walking the empty streets. Seattle at night had always cleared his head. The combination of salt air from the Sound and the energy of a city that never quite slept. But tonight his mind refused to quiet. The timing was impossible to ignore. If Lena had been pregnant when they broke up and hadn't told him, why? If she had discovered it afterward, why hadn't she reached out? And if those babies weren't his, if the timing was just a cruel coincidence, why did the possibility feel like a physical ache in his chest? By the time he returned to his building, Adrian had made a decision he wasn't proud of. He called Marcus Webb, the private investigator his company used for due diligence on potential business partners. Marcus answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Adrian, what do you need? This is personal, not business. Even better, personal pays more. Adrian gave Marcus Lena's full name and last known address, feeling like he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross. I need to know where she's living now, what she's been doing for the past year. Specifically, I need to know about any children. Marcus was quiet for a moment. This is about an ex? Yes. And you think she might have had your kid without telling you? I think I need to know for certain that she didn't. Fair enough. Give me 24 hours. After hanging up, Adrian stood in his living room surrounded by the material evidence of his success. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Elliott Bay. His furniture was custom designed, his art collection worth more than most people's houses. Everything was exactly as he had wanted it. Clean, uncluttered, free of the domestic chaos he had once feared would suffocate him. But tonight, the space felt vast and empty. He poured himself 3 fingers of Macallan 25 and settled into the leather chair where he usually read financial reports. Instead, he found himself remembering details about Lena he had tried to forget. The way she hummed while cooking always the same song, The Way You Look Tonight, usually off-key but completely unconscious of it. How she kept a small notebook where she wrote down funny things people said, claiming she was collecting material for a novel she would never write. The careful way she arranged flowers, spending 20 minutes adjusting stems until the composition satisfied some internal aesthetic he couldn't see but learned to appreciate. And the conversation they'd had 6 weeks before the breakup, when she'd mentioned her sister's new baby. Don't you ever wonder what it would be like, she had asked, watching him hold his nephew at a family gathering, having someone who's part of both of us? No, he had said and meant it. I've worked too hard to build this life to complicate it now. She had nodded and changed the subject. but he remembered the brief shadow that crossed her face. At the time, he had attributed it to natural disappointment. Most women her age wanted children eventually. Now he wondered if it had been something more specific. Adrian's phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. "Hope you're getting some answers. Sleep well." He stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you." But sleep felt impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lena pausing in that crosswalk, adjusting those blankets with such gentle expertise. She had looked different, not just because of motherhood, but because of a kind of peace he had never seen in her before. During their relationship, Lena had always carried a slight tension, as if she were waiting for something. He had assumed it was career ambition, or the normal stress of living in an expensive city. Now he wondered if she had been waiting for him to want the same thing she did. And when it became clear that he never would, she had stopped waiting and started building the life she wanted without him. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like loss, not just of Lena, but of possibilities he had been too afraid to consider. As dawn approached, Adrian made a decision that surprised him. Whatever Marcus discovered, however this played out, he wouldn't hide behind investigators and intermediaries. If those babies were his, he would face it directly. The question was, what would he do then? Marcus Webb's office was located in a nondescript building in Pioneer Square, sandwiched between a vintage bookstore and a coffee roastery that filled the hallway with the rich scent of dark roast. Adrian had never been here before. Their previous business had always been conducted over secure phone calls and encrypted emails, but this felt too personal, too important for digital communication. Marcus was a man in his 50s who looked like he could blend into any crowd. Average height, brown hair going gray at the temples, clothes that were expensive enough to be respectable, but unremarkable enough to be forgettable. It was exactly what made him excellent at his job. "I have what you asked for," Marcus said, sliding a manila folder across his desk. "But before you look at it, I need to ask, are you prepared for whatever's in here?" Adrian's hand hovered over the folder. 24 hours of waiting had felt like a lifetime. He had barely slept, had canceled 2 important meetings, and had found himself driving past the Capitol Hill neighborhood 3 times looking for glimpses of auburn hair and baby strollers. "Just tell me." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Lena Hart, 32 years old, currently residing at 1247 Pine Street, apartment 3B. She works part-time as a freelance marketing consultant for Clearwater Communications. Single mother to twins Oliver James Hart and Emma Grace Hart, born 4 months and 2 weeks ago at Swedish Medical Center." Adrian's breath caught. 4 months and 2 weeks. The timing was perfect, or terrible, depending on how he looked at it. "The father?" he managed. "Not listed on the birth certificates. Hospital records show she attended all prenatal appointments alone, listed herself as single, and declined to provide paternal information for medical history." The words hit Adrian like physical blows. No father listed, all appointments alone. She had deliberately kept him out of every aspect of their existence. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Financial records show she's been supporting herself entirely. No mysterious deposits, no child support payments, no help from family beyond occasional babysitting by her sister Claire. She's been doing this completely on her own." Adrian opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, surveillance shots that made him feel like a voyeur, but he couldn't stop looking. Lena pushing a double stroller through Pike Place Market, both babies bundled against the Seattle drizzle. Lena at a pediatrician's office, juggling diaper bags and car seats with practiced efficiency. Lena sitting in a park, holding Oliver while Emma napped in the stroller, her face peaceful as she watched other families play. But it was the last photograph that broke something inside him. Lena was in what appeared to be her living room, both babies on a blanket on the floor during tummy time. She was lying on her stomach facing them, her chin propped on her hands, smiling at something one of them was doing. The image captured a moment of pure joy, intimate and unguarded. It was the expression he had seen her wear exactly once during their relationship, when she held her newborn nephew for the first time. "The babies," Adrian said quietly. Do they look like anyone in particular?" Marcus studied Adrian's face carefully. "I'm not a geneticist, but the boy has some strong features that could be coincidental, or could be inherited." Adrian closed the folder, his mind reeling. Everything he had built his life around, control, choice, careful planning, had been obliterated by a decision Lena had made without him. She had known she was carrying his children, and had chosen to raise them alone rather than complicate his carefully constructed freedom. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like betrayal and loss wrapped together in something he couldn't name. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. "She's been looking for a full-time position. 3 interviews in the past 2 weeks, all for marketing director roles that would pay significantly more than her current freelance work. My guess is the part-time income isn't covering expenses with 2 babies. Money. Of course it came down to money eventually." Adrian's first instinct was cynical. Maybe Lena's silence hadn't been about protecting him, but about positioning herself for a larger settlement later. But even as the thought formed, he dismissed it. The woman in those photographs, struggling with diaper bags and managing 2 babies alone, didn't look like someone playing a long game for financial gain. She looked like someone doing her best with an impossible situation. "I want you to stop the surveillance," Adrian said suddenly, "and I want all copies of these photos destroyed. Everything. Digital files, prints, cloud backups. I want your word that this never happened." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You sure? I could keep monitoring the situation, let you know if—" "No, this isn't how I want to handle this. And Marcus, I need those photos destroyed before I leave here today." Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the request. "Consider it done. Everything gets wiped clean." After leaving Marcus's office, Adrian drove aimlessly through the city, ending up parked outside his office building. Through his car window, he could see his company logo etched in gold on the building's facade. Coal Renewable Energy. Everything he had worked for, everything he had prioritized over personal relationships, everything that had seemed so important just 2 days ago. His phone buzzed with a call from his business partner, David Chen. "Where have you been? The Portland investors are expecting your presentation this afternoon. Reschedule it." "Adrian, we've been working toward this deal for 6 months. This could be the expansion that puts us in competition with the major players." I said, "Reschedule it." There was silence on the line. Adrian had never, in 10 years of partnership, asked to postpone a major presentation. "Everything okay? I need some time to handle a personal matter." "Personal? You don't have personal matters." The comment stung because it was true. Adrian had spent the past year constructing a life with no personal complications, no emotional entanglements that could interfere with his professional goals. It had seemed like wisdom at the time. Now it felt like cowardice. After hanging up, Adrian sat in his car for nearly an hour, watching people walk past on the sidewalk. Families, couples, individuals all moving through their lives with purposes he couldn't see. For the first time in his adult life, he felt completely untethered from his own purpose. He thought about calling Lena directly, but what would he say? "I hired a private investigator to spy on you and discovered you've been raising my children in secret." There was no version of that conversation that didn't make him sound like either a stalker or an absent father. But he couldn't pretend he didn't know. The knowledge sat in his chest like a weight, making every breath feel deliberate. His phone rang again. This time it was Cassandra. "How are you holding up?" "I found out what I needed to know." "And?" Adrian closed his eyes. "And now I have to figure out what to do about it." "Whatever it is, you don't have to figure it out alone. You know that, right?" But that was exactly wrong. This was something he did have to figure out alone, because any decision he made would affect 4 lives. His, Lena's, and 2 babies who had no voice in any of it. "I need to go," he said. "Adrian, for what it's worth, you're a good person. Even when you're confused, you're good." After hanging up, Adrian started his car and drove toward Capitol Hill. He didn't have a plan, didn't know what he would say or do, but he couldn't spend another night knowing his children were 5 miles away, being raised by a woman who had chosen silence over asking for help. As he turned onto Pine Street, Adrian realized that everything he thought he had known about himself, his priorities, his values, his capacity for love, was about to be tested in ways he had never imagined. The question wasn't whether he was ready. The question was whether he was brave enough to try. Adrian sat in his car across from 1247 Pine Street for 45 minutes, watching the Victorian-style apartment building through the evening drizzle. The structure was well-maintained but modest, with flower boxes in the windows and a small courtyard where someone had planted herbs between the walkway stones. It was exactly the kind of place Lena would choose. Charming, practical, with touches of beauty that didn't cost much but meant everything. Apartment 3B had a single light glowing behind sheer curtains. Occasionally, a shadow moved past the window. Lena, he assumed, going about the evening routine of caring for 2 babies. The domesticity of it, the quiet normalcy, made his chest tighten with something he couldn't name. 3 times he had reached for the door handle. 3 times he had stopped. What right did he have to disrupt the life she had built? She had made her choice deliberately, keeping him out not from cruelty but from what she must have believed was kindness. She had known him well enough to understand that fatherhood wasn't something he wanted, and she had acted accordingly. But sitting here, knowing his children were upstairs, made Adrian realize that what he had thought he wanted and what he actually needed might be 2 entirely different things. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Portland investors rescheduled for Monday. They weren't happy but agreed to wait. Monday felt like it belonged to a different life, a life where his biggest concern was market share and renewable energy, not whether he had the courage to knock on a door and face the most important conversation of his life. A movement caught his eye. The building's front door opened, and Lena emerged carrying a small bag of garbage. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun secured with what looked like a pencil. Even from across the street, Adrian could see the exhaustion in the way she moved. Not the dramatic fatigue of someone seeking sympathy, but the bone-deep tiredness of someone pushing through because there was no other choice. She walked to the dumpster behind the building, and Adrian found himself getting out of his car. By the time she turned around, he was standing 15 feet away on the sidewalk. Lena froze, the color draining from her face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The Seattle evening stretched between them, filled with the distant sounds of traffic and the soft patter of rain on leaves. "Adrian," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral, "what are you doing here? I saw you yesterday, downtown. You were crossing the street." Her hand went instinctively to her throat, a gesture he remembered from their relationship whenever she was processing something difficult. "I didn't see you. You were carrying 2 babies." The words hung in the air between them like an accusation. Lena's eyes didn't leave his face, but he could see her calculating, deciding how much truth this moment could hold. "Yes," she said simply. "Are they mine?" The question came out harsher than he intended, but Lena didn't flinch. She looked at him for a long moment, and Adrian saw something in her expression he had never seen before, a kind of protective fierceness that made her seem like an entirely different person from the woman he had lived with. "What do you want me to say, Adrian? I want you to tell me the truth." "The truth?" Lena's voice gained strength. "The truth is that I'm raising 2 beautiful, healthy children. The truth is that they're happy and loved and don't lack for anything important. The truth is that their lives are settled and peaceful, and I've worked very hard to make sure they stay that way. That's not what I asked. It's the only answer that matters." Adrian stepped closer, and he saw Lena's shoulders tense, not with fear. He had never given her reason to fear him, but with the kind of protective alertness he imagined came with motherhood. "Don't I have a right to know if I'm a father?" "You have the right to live the life you chose," Lena said quietly. "The life you were very clear about wanting. No complications, no commitments, no children tying you down." The words were like physical blows, made worse because they were accurate. He had said those things, or versions of them, during their relationship whenever conversations turned toward the future, toward the kind of life Lena had dreamed about. Adrian had been consistently, honestly resistant. "People change," he said. "Do they?" Lena's green eyes searched his face. "Or do they just have regrets when they see what they might have given up?" From inside the building, a baby's cry pierced the evening quiet. Both Adrian and Lena's heads turned toward the sound, but it was Lena who moved first, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. "I have to go," she said, already walking toward the building entrance. "Wait." Adrian followed her. "Please, just 5 minutes. Let me see them." Lena stopped with her hand on the door handle. "Why?" "Because if they're mine, I need to know. I need to see them." "And then what? You decide whether you want to be involved based on how you feel in the moment? You disrupt their routine, their sense of security, their understanding of their world? Because you're curious?" The baby's crying grew more insistent, joined by a second voice. Twins, Adrian realized. His children, he was almost certain now, needing their mother while he stood here demanding answers to questions that might not have good solutions. "I hired a private investigator," he said suddenly, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Lena's entire body went still. "What?" "I needed to know for sure. About the timing, about everything. You had me followed?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but there was something dangerous in it. "I needed to understand. You had me followed while I was caring for my children. Our children." "No." Lena's voice cut through the rain like a blade. "My children." The children I carried alone, delivered alone, and have been raising alone while you've been living exactly the life you told me you wanted." She turned away from him, but Adrian caught her arm gently. "Lena, please. I know I handled this wrong, but—" "Handled what wrong?" She pulled her arm free but didn't walk away. "You didn't handle anything. I handled everything. I made the decision not to tell you because I knew that you would do exactly this. Show up out of nowhere when it was convenient for you, expecting me to explain myself, expecting me to justify choices I made to protect everyone involved." The babies were crying in earnest now, their voices carrying through the building's thin walls. Lena looked toward the sound with obvious distress. "I have to go to them. Let me come with you. Just to see them. Just once." Lena studied his face, and Adrian saw her weighing the request against everything she had worked to build and protect. "Why now?" she asked finally. "Why, after more than a year of silence, do you suddenly care?" It was a fair question, and Adrian realized he didn't have a good answer. Because he had seen her crossing the street and felt something break open inside him? Because his carefully constructed life had suddenly felt empty? Because he was finally brave enough to face what he had been running from? "Because I think I've been running from the wrong things," he said finally. "And I think you've been protecting me from something I needed to face." Lena looked at him for a long moment, rain beginning to darken her sweater. Above them the crying continued, and Adrian could see her internal struggle, the mother who needed to comfort her children warring with the woman who had every right to tell him to leave and never come back. "5 minutes," she said finally. "You can see them for 5 minutes, and then you leave, and you think very carefully about what you actually want, not what you think you should want, because I won't let you disrupt their lives unless you're absolutely certain you're ready to be in them permanently." Adrian nodded, not trusting his voice. As Lena unlocked the building door, she paused without looking at him. "Their names are Oliver and Emma," she said quietly. "Oliver has your eyes. Emma has your stubborn streak, and they are the best thing I've ever done with my life." The words hit Adrian like a revelation and a warning all at once. As they climbed the narrow stairs to the 3rd floor, he realized he was about to meet his children for the first time, and possibly say goodbye to them forever, depending on whether he was brave enough to become the man they deserved to have as a father. The apartment was smaller than Adrian's walk-in closet, but every inch had been thoughtfully arranged. Soft lighting came from table lamps instead of overhead fixtures, creating pools of warmth throughout the space. Children's books were stacked on a coffee table made from reclaimed wood, and a mobile of delicate paper cranes hung over what he assumed was the baby's sleeping area. The crying had stopped the moment Lena walked through the door, replaced by excited gurgling and the sound of tiny hands slapping against something soft. "They know your voice," Adrian said, the observation catching him off guard. "They know I always come back," Lena replied, dropping her keys in a small bowl by the door. "Wait here." She disappeared around a corner and Adrian heard her voice change to the sing-song cadence people used with babies. "I'm here, my loves. Mama's here. Were you telling Oliver a story, Emma? Was it a good one?" The baby's responses were wordless but enthusiastic, a chorus of coos and squeaks that made Adrian's chest tighten unexpectedly. He had never thought much about the sounds babies made, had certainly never imagined finding them meaningful. But hearing these particular babies, his babies, their voices felt like a language he was supposed to understand but had never learned. "You can come in now," Lena called. Adrian rounded the corner into what must have been the bedroom, though it had been converted into something entirely different. The double bed was pushed against one wall, leaving most of the floor space for a large, colorful playmat. Above it, black and white geometric patterns were taped to the walls. High-contrast images that Adrian vaguely remembered reading were good for infant development. But all of that registered peripherally, because his attention was completely captured by the 2 babies lying on their backs looking up at him with wide, curious eyes. Oliver was larger, more solid, with dark hair that stuck up in all directions. His eyes were steel gray, unmistakably Adrian's eyes, and he was gnawing on his own fist with serious concentration. Emma was smaller, more delicate, with auburn hair that caught the light like Lena's. Her green eyes tracked Adrian's movement as he stepped closer, and she kicked her legs with apparent excitement at having a new person to examine. "Oliver James and Emma Grace," Lena said quietly, settling cross-legged beside the playmat. "Oliver, Emma, this is—" She hesitated, and Adrian realized she had no idea how to introduce him. "This is Adrian." Adrian knelt slowly, afraid that sudden movements might startle them. He had held babies before, nieces and nephews at family gatherings, colleagues' children at company picnics, but this was different. These weren't borrowed babies he would hand back after a few polite minutes. These were his children, looking at him with the completely open curiosity that only babies possessed. "Can I?" He gestured toward them uncertainly. "Oliver likes his tummy rubbed. Emma prefers when you talk to her." Adrian reached out tentatively, placing his hand gently on Oliver's stomach. The baby's eyes widened, and he released his fist to grab Adrian's finger with surprisingly strong grip. The contact sent an electric shock through Adrian's system. This tiny person was holding on to him with complete trust, unaware of the complicated circumstances of his existence. "He's strong," Adrian said, his voice rougher than intended. "He's been holding his head up since 8 weeks. The pediatrician says he's very advanced." Emma made a soft sound, and Adrian turned to look at her. She was studying his face with serious intensity, as if she were trying to solve a puzzle. "Hello, Emma," he said softly. "You're beautiful." As if she understood the compliment, Emma smiled. A real smile, not the reflexive expressions newborns sometimes made. Her entire face lit up and she kicked her legs harder, making happy gurgling sounds. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. "She likes you," Lena observed, though her voice was carefully neutral. "How can you tell?" "She doesn't smile for strangers. It took her 3 weeks to smile for my sister." The implication hung in the air between them. Emma had smiled for Adrian immediately, as if some part of her recognized him, as if biology had programmed her to trust this particular face, this particular voice. Oliver was still gripping Adrian's finger, occasionally bringing it toward his mouth to examine with his gums. Adrian found himself mesmerized by the baby's expressions. Serious concentration when studying Adrian's watch, brief alarm when a car honked outside, contentment when Adrian started gently stroking his hair. "What are they like?" Adrian asked. "Their personalities, I mean." Lena was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. "Oliver is more physical. He's been trying to roll over since 6 weeks. Gets frustrated when he can't do something right away. Emma is more observant. She watches everything, processes it, then usually figures out what Oliver was struggling with on her first try. They're different from each other. Completely. Oliver wakes up happy but gets tired fast. Emma takes forever to warm up in the morning but can go for hours once she's alert. Oliver likes baths. Emma hates them. Emma falls asleep easily. Oliver fights it every single night. As if to demonstrate, Oliver's eyes were already growing heavy, his grip on Adrian's finger loosening. Emma, meanwhile, was wide awake, still studying Adrian's face like she was memorizing it. "She's going to be trouble," Adrian said, unable to suppress a smile. "I can already tell." "She's going to be brilliant," Lena corrected. "The trouble will be keeping up with her." For several minutes they sat in comfortable silence. Adrian found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't expected, lulled by the simple pleasure of watching his children discover their world. Oliver had fallen asleep with Adrian's finger still in his grasp, and Emma had discovered her own feet, grabbing them with delighted concentration. "This is what you do every day," Adrian said finally. "Watch them, learn them, figure out what they need. Among other things." "It's not what I expected." Lena looked at him sharply. "What did you expect?" Adrian struggled to find words. "I don't know. More chaos, maybe. More overwhelming responsibility. This feels..." He gestured at the peaceful scene. "It feels manageable, natural." "That's because you're seeing the good moment," Lena said. "You're not here at 2 in the morning when they're both crying and nothing I do helps. You're not here when Emma has a fever and I'm calling the pediatrician in a panic. You're not here when Oliver refuses to eat for 3 days straight and I'm convinced I'm doing everything wrong." The words weren't accusatory, just factual, but they highlighted the gap between what Adrian was experiencing now and what parenthood actually entailed. "I could be," he said quietly. "Could be what?" "Here, for the hard moments too." Lena was very still. "Adrian, I know what I said before. I know what I thought I wanted, but sitting here looking at them..." He gently extracted his finger from Oliver's sleeping grip. "I was wrong. About what would make me happy. About what was important. One good moment doesn't erase 18 years of responsibility. I know that. Do you? Because this isn't a business deal you can negotiate your way out of if it gets difficult. These are people, Adrian. Small people who need consistency and reliability and unconditional love." Emma made a soft sound and both adults looked at her. She was fighting sleep now, her eyes drooping but snapping open whenever she started to drift off. "She doesn't want to miss anything," Lena said softly. Even when she's exhausted, she fights sleep because she might miss something interesting. Like her mother. Lena looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? You used to do that. During conferences, or when we were traveling. You'd be dead tired but refuse to go to bed because you were afraid you'd miss some conversation or experience. I don't remember you noticing that. I noticed everything about you. I just didn't know how to appreciate it at the time. The admission hung between them, loaded with regret and possibility. Emma finally lost her battle with sleep, her tiny body relaxing into the soft blanket beneath her. Your 5 minutes are up, Lena said quietly. Adrian looked at his children, sleeping peacefully on their playmat. Oliver with his serious little face, Emma with her stubborn chin already visible even at 4 months old. They were perfect, and they were his, and he had missed the first 4 months of their lives because he had been too afraid to want them. What happens now? He asked. Now you leave, and you decide what you actually want your life to look like. Not what you think you should want, not what's convenient, but what will make you happy in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Adrian stood slowly, reluctant to break the peaceful tableau. And if I decide I want to be part of this, then we'll figure out how to make that work. But Adrian, Lena stood too, facing him across their sleeping children. I won't let you be a part-time father. I won't let you drop in and out of their lives when it's convenient for you. If you want this, you have to want all of it. The sleepless nights, the endless worry, the complete reorganization of everything you thought your life would be. And if I want all of it? For the first time since he had arrived, Lena's carefully controlled expression softened slightly. Then we'll start slowly, carefully, and we'll see if the man you are now can become the father they deserve. As Adrian walked toward the door, he turned back for one last look at Oliver and Emma. They slept with the complete peace of children who were utterly secure in being loved. He wanted to be part of creating that security. He wanted to be someone they could count on. The question was whether he was brave enough to completely restructure his life to make that possible. Adrian didn't go home. Instead, he drove to Cary Park, the small overlook that offered the best view of Seattle's skyline. At this hour, the park was nearly empty except for a few late-night photographers capturing the city lights reflected in Elliott Bay. He sat on a bench facing the view that had always grounded him, but tonight the familiar sight offered no clarity. His phone had been buzzing steadily for the past hour. Cassandra had called twice, David had sent 3 texts about rescheduled meetings, and his assistant had forwarded urgent emails that normally would have had his immediate attention. But all of it felt like noise from a world that suddenly seemed very far away. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's smile, Oliver's serious concentration as he studied Adrian's face, the way Lena had moved around them with such natural competence, anticipating their needs before they even expressed them. His children. He had children. The thought still felt surreal, but underneath the disbelief was something else, a sense of rightness that he had never experienced before. Holding Oliver's tiny hand, watching Emma's eyes track his every movement, had felt like finding a part of himself he hadn't known was missing. But wanting something, and being capable of it, were 2 different things. Adrian's phone rang, and he almost ignored it until he saw the caller ID. His father. Dad. Adrian. I've been trying to reach you all day. David said you canceled the Portland meeting. Richard Cole was not a man who called without purpose. At 68, he remained sharp, direct, and perpetually disappointed that his only son had chosen renewable energy over the family's traditional oil investments. Their relationship had always been cordial but distant, built on mutual respect for each other's business acumen but little emotional intimacy. Something came up. Something more important than a $40 million expansion deal? Adrian almost laughed. 24 hours ago, he would have said nothing was more important than that deal. Now he wasn't sure it ranked in his top 10 priorities. Dad, can I ask you something? There was a pause. Adrian never asked his father for advice, and they both knew it. Of course. When I was born, were you ready to be a father? The silence stretched long enough that Adrian wondered if the connection had dropped. That's an unusual question, Richard said finally. Why do you ask? I'm trying to understand something about choice versus responsibility. Adrian, is there something you need to tell me? The opening was there. Adrian could explain everything. Lena, the babies, the impossible decision he was facing. His father had navigated parenthood, had somehow managed to build a successful company while raising a child. Maybe he had insights that could help. But even as the thought formed, Adrian dismissed it. His father's version of fatherhood had been competent, but emotionally remote. Present for major milestones, absent for daily struggles. Successful by traditional metrics, but lacking the kind of warmth Adrian had seen in Lena's interactions with Oliver and Emma. "No," Adrian said. "Just thinking about some life changes." "Well, if you're considering major changes, remember that consistency builds empires. Your mother and I have been married 42 years because we decided to be married, not because we felt like it every day. Success in any endeavor requires commitment beyond feelings." After hanging up, Adrian sat with his father's words, commitment beyond feelings. It was exactly the kind of practical wisdom that had guided Adrian's entire adult life. Make decisions based on logic, stick with them regardless of temporary emotions, build something lasting through discipline rather than passion. But was that what Oliver and Emma needed? A father who showed up out of duty rather than love? His phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. "Thinking about you. Whatever you're going through, you don't have to decide everything tonight." She was right, but Adrian felt the weight of time in a way he never had before. Every day he delayed was another day of Oliver and Emma's lives he would miss. Another day of Lena managing everything alone. Another day of his children growing up without him. But rushing into a decision this important could be even worse than delaying it. Adrian drove home finally, but sleep was impossible. He found himself in his home office, staring at financial projections for the Portland deal that had seemed crucial yesterday. The numbers were solid, the market projections favorable, the potential returns substantial. None of it mattered. By morning, Adrian had made a list, not a pros and cons analysis. This wasn't a business decision that could be quantified, but a list of what would need to change if he chose to be a real father to Oliver and Emma. His work schedule would have to be completely restructured. 18-hour days and last-minute travel would be impossible with children who needed consistency. His penthouse apartment would need to be child-proofed, or better yet, traded for something more family-friendly. His social life, his hobbies, his carefully maintained independence, all of it would be secondary to the needs of two small people who had no one else to depend on. The list was daunting, but as Adrian read through it, he realized something surprising. None of the changes felt like sacrifices. They felt like opportunities to become someone better than he currently was. At 7 a.m., he called David. "Adrian, thank God. I've been fielding calls all morning about yesterday's cancellations. I need to restructure my role in the company." "What does that mean?" "It means I want to step back from day-to-day operations, focus on strategic planning and long-term vision, but eliminate the constant travel and emergency meetings." David was quiet for so long that Adrian checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Are you having some kind of breakdown?" David asked finally. "I'm having some kind of breakthrough." "Adrian, we're on the verge of the biggest expansion in the company's history. This isn't the time to reduce your involvement. This is exactly the time. We've built something successful enough to run without me micromanaging every decision. If it can't survive my stepping back, then we haven't built it right." After a long negotiation, David agreed to a trial period. Adrian would remain as CEO and primary investor, but would delegate operational control to their senior management team. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. His next call was to his real estate agent. "I want to sell the penthouse," Adrian said without preamble, "and I need you to help me find something else." "Okay, what are you looking for?" Adrian thought about Lena's apartment, about the way every corner had been arranged with children in mind. A house, 3 bedrooms minimum, good schools nearby, a yard, somewhere a family would be happy. The real estate agent sounded confused but professional. "Of course. When do you want to start looking?" "Today." By afternoon, Adrian had seen 6 properties in family-friendly neighborhoods throughout Seattle. The Queen Anne Victorian with original hardwood floors, the Craftsman bungalow in Wallingford with a garden perfect for children to explore, the modern townhouse in Capitol Hill, walking distance from Lena's apartment. None of them felt like home the way his penthouse had, but that was the point. Home wasn't supposed to be a monument to his individual success anymore. It was supposed to be a place where Oliver and Emma could grow up safely, where Lena would feel welcome, where a family could build memories together. As evening approached, Adrian found himself parked outside Lena's building again. But this time he wasn't there to demand answers or satisfy his curiosity. He was there to make a promise. He climbed the stairs to apartment 3B and knocked softly. Lena opened the door wearing the same exhausted expression he had seen the night before. But when she saw Adrian, her face shifted to wariness. It's been less than 24 hours, she said. I know, but I couldn't wait. Adrian, I want all of it, he said quickly, before she could send him away. The sleepless nights, the worry, the complete reorganization of my life. I want to be their father, not part-time, not when it's convenient, but really be their father. Lena studied his face, looking for something. Certainty, maybe, or proof that this wasn't just an impulsive decision he would regret when the reality set in. What does that look like to you? She asked finally. Being their father? I don't know yet, Adrian admitted, but I want to learn. I want to be someone they can count on, someone who shows up for them even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. From inside the apartment came the sound of babies waking from naps, their voices joining in the kind of harmony that only twins could create. Lena looked toward the sound, then back at Adrian. This isn't going to be easy, for any of us. I know. I'm not the same person I was when we were together. Being their mother has changed me in ways that make some things non-negotiable. I'm counting on that. For the first time since he had appeared at her door, Lena smiled. Not the careful, controlled expression she had been wearing, but something real and cautiously hopeful. Then I guess we'd better figure out how to do this right. As she opened the door wider to let him in, Adrian realized he was crossing more than just a threshold. He was stepping into a life that would demand everything from him and give him everything in return. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like coming home. 3 weeks into their tentative new arrangement, Adrian discovered that fatherhood was nothing like running a company. Babies, he learned, did not respond to quarterly projections, efficiency protocols, or logical reasoning. They responded to patience he didn't know he possessed and love he was still learning how to express. She's been crying for 20 minutes, Adrian said, gently bouncing Emma against his chest while pacing Lena's living room. I've tried everything, bottle, diaper, burping, that thing you do with the white noise app. Lena looked up from where she was feeding Oliver, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. The past 3 weeks had been an adjustment for all of them. Adrian had been coming by every evening after work, staying later each night, learning the intricate rhythms of caring for 2 infants. Sometimes they just need to cry, Lena said softly. It's how they process their world. But there has to be something I can do. Some solution. The solution is accepting that you can't solve everything. It was a lesson Adrian was learning in multiple areas of his life. His work restructuring had been more challenging than anticipated. Delegating control to his management team felt like watching his other children, he corrected himself, take their first steps without him there to catch them if they fell. Emma's cries began to subside, and Adrian realized she had fallen asleep against his shoulder. The weight of her tiny body, the trust implicit in the way she relaxed completely in his arms, still amazed him. You're getting better at this, Lena observed. I had a good teacher. The past 3 weeks had been a masterclass in caregiving, with Lena patiently explaining everything from proper bottle-holding angles to the subtle differences between Emma's various cries. Adrian had filled 2 notebooks with observations, treating fatherhood with the same systematic approach he brought to business ventures. But unlike business, the most important lessons couldn't be written down. I found a house, Adrian said quietly, settling into the chair beside Lena's couch. The Craftsman in Wallingford. 4 bedrooms, big kitchen, yard with space for a swing set. Lena's hand stilled on Oliver's back. They had been talking around the topic of living arrangements for days, neither wanting to push too fast but both recognizing that the current situation was unsustainable. That's wonderful, she said carefully. When do you close? I haven't made an offer yet. Why not? Adrian looked at Emma sleeping in his arms, then at Oliver contentedly nursing. Because I don't want to assume anything about what you want, what would work for you and the babies. Lena was quiet for a long moment. Adrian, we need to talk about what we're doing here. The word sent a chill through Adrian's chest. For 3 weeks, they had been dancing around the bigger questions. Their relationship, their future, the practical realities of raising children together when they weren't together romantically. Okay, he said. This arrangement we have now with you coming by in the evenings, it's working for Oliver and Emma. They're starting to recognize you, to expect you. Emma reaches for you when she sees you. Oliver calms down when he hears your voice. But I need to know what happens when this stops feeling new and exciting. When you've been up all night with a teething baby and you have an important meeting the next day. When we disagree about discipline or schools or 1,000 other decisions parents have to make together. Adrian shifted Emma to his other arm, buying time to formulate his response. These were the questions that kept him awake at night. Not whether he loved his children, that had become abundantly clear, but whether love would be enough when the daily realities of shared parenting tested every assumption they were making about their ability to coexist. "I won't lie and say it will be easy," he said finally. "But Lena, 3 weeks ago I thought success meant never having to consider anyone else's needs when making decisions. Now I can't imagine making any decision without thinking about how it affects Oliver and Emma. That's not what I'm asking." "Then what are you asking?" Lena lifted Oliver to her shoulder and began rubbing his back in slow circles. "I'm asking whether you're prepared to do this even when we disagree, even when I make parenting choices you don't understand, even when being a family means compromising on things you're not used to compromising on." The question hit at the heart of Adrian's deepest fear, not that he would fail as a father, but that his years of independent decision-making had left him incapable of the kind of partnership that successful co-parenting required. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I want to find out." Before Lena could respond, Adrian's phone rang. The caller ID showed David's number, and Adrian declined the call without hesitation. "You can take it if you need to," Lena said. "No, this is my time with you and the babies." But the phone rang again immediately, followed by a text. "Emergency. Portland deal falling apart. Need you now." Adrian looked at the message, then at Emma, sleeping peacefully in his arms. 6 months ago, he would have handed the baby to Lena and rushed to the office without a second thought. Tonight, he turned the phone off. "Adrian, if it's important, nothing is more important than this," he said, and meant it completely. The moment felt significant, but before either of them could comment on it, Oliver began fussing against Lena's shoulder. She stood to walk him, but Adrian noticed her slight wince as she rose. "Your back is hurting again." "It's fine." "It's not fine. You've been carrying both of them constantly for months. Let me help." "You are helping. I mean really help. Move in with me. Not because of us, but because of them. They need consistency, and you need support." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither had been willing to address directly. "Adrian, I know it's complicated. I know we have history that makes this messier than it should be, but put that aside for a minute and think about what would be best for Oliver and Emma." Lena was quiet, swaying gently as Oliver's fussing subsided. "What would that look like? Practically, I mean. You and the babies would have the master suite. I'd take one of the smaller bedrooms. We'd share common spaces, share parenting duties, but maintain our own independence otherwise. Like roommates who happen to share children. Like parents who are committed to making this work regardless of whether we figure out the rest." It wasn't romantic, but it was honest. Neither of them was ready to navigate the emotional complexity of rekindling their relationship while learning to be parents together. But they were both ready to prioritize their children's needs over their own uncertainty. "I need time to think about it," Lena said. "Of course." Emma stirred in Adrian's arms, making the soft mewing sounds that meant she was waking up. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on Adrian's face with the kind of complete attention that babies gave to everything they found interesting. "Hi, beautiful girl," he whispered. "Did you have a good nap?" Emma's response was a smile that lit up her entire face, followed by excited leg kicks that made Adrian laugh. "She definitely knows you now," Lena observed, and there was something in her voice that made Adrian look up. "What?" "You're different with them than you were with me. More patient, more present. Maybe because I finally understand what's important, or maybe because babies don't ask for things that scare you." The comment stung because it was accurate. Babies needed basic care, attention, and love, all things Adrian was learning to provide. But they didn't ask for emotional vulnerability, long-term commitment, or the kind of deep intimacy that had terrified him during his relationship with Lena. "You're right," he said. "It's easier to love them than it was to love you." Lena looked surprised by his honesty. "But," Adrian continued, "maybe that's because loving you meant risking everything I thought I knew about myself. Loving them means becoming everything I never knew I could be." Oliver had fallen asleep against Lena's chest, and she settled back onto the couch beside Adrian. For several minutes, they sat in comfortable silence, each holding a sleeping baby, both lost in their own thoughts about the impossible complexity of building a family from the pieces of a broken relationship. "The house in Wallingford," Lena said finally. "Does it have a good kitchen?" Adrian's heart jumped. "Large kitchen island, gas range, plenty of counter space." And the yard? Big enough for a playground. Mature trees. The neighbors have kids. Lena nodded slowly. I'd want to see it before deciding anything. Of course. And we'd need clear boundaries. About space, about expectations, about what happens if this arrangement doesn't work. Whatever you need. As if sensing the importance of the moment, both babies chose that instant to wake up simultaneously, their eyes bright and alert as they looked between their parents. I think they're voting yes, Adrian said softly. For the first time in weeks, Lena laughed. A real laugh, not the careful responses she had been giving him since he reappeared in her life. I think they might be, she agreed. Looking at his family, because that's what they were, he realized, regardless of the complicated circumstances, Adrian felt a peace he had never experienced in any boardroom or business deal. This was what success actually looked like. The house in Wallingford was everything Adrian had described and more. Lena stood in the spacious kitchen, watching morning light stream through tall windows onto countertops where she could easily imagine preparing bottles, while keeping an eye on the babies in the adjacent living room. The master suite upstairs was larger than her entire current apartment, with built-in bookshelves and a window seat that would be perfect for late-night feedings. The previous owners had 3 children, the realtor explained, pointing out safety features Lena hadn't even thought to look for. All the outlets are already child-proofed, and there are safety gates in storage in the basement. Emma gurgled happily from her carrier, while Oliver slept against Adrian's chest in the baby wrap he had learned to use with surprising competence. Watching him navigate the house with such natural ease, Lena could almost imagine this working, the 3 of them building something stable and peaceful for the children. What do you think? Adrian asked quietly, as they stood in what would be the nursery. I think it's perfect for them, Lena said, because it was true. I think they could be happy here. But, Lena touched the window frame, looking out at the backyard where mature oak trees provided shade for what would someday be a playground. But I need to know that you're not doing this just because you feel guilty. What do you mean? I mean that guilt is a terrible foundation for a family. If you're trying to make up for missing the first months of their lives, or if you're trying to prove something to yourself about what kind of man you are, then this won't work long term. Adrian adjusted Oliver's position, his expression thoughtful. You're asking if I'm doing this for them or for me. I'm asking if you've really thought about what happens in 2 years when the novelty wears off, when they're toddlers getting into everything and you can't get any work done at home, when they're teenagers and you disagree with my parenting choices. The realtor had discreetly moved to another room, giving them privacy for what was clearly a significant conversation. Lena, Adrian said carefully, I can't predict how I'll feel in 2 years, but I can tell you that every morning for the past 3 weeks, the first thing I think about when I wake up is whether Oliver slept through the night, and if Emma's cough is getting better. I can tell you that I rescheduled a board meeting yesterday because it conflicted with Emma's 6-month checkup. 6-month checkup isn't for another week. I know. I put it in my calendar so I wouldn't miss it. The admission was so unexpectedly sweet that Lena felt her carefully maintained emotional defenses waver. Adrian was trying so hard to be the father he thought Oliver and Emma deserved, even when he didn't fully understand what that meant yet. The house is beautiful, she said finally. If you're sure this is what you want, then yes. We should try living together. For them. Adrian's smile was radiant, and for a moment, Lena saw the man she had fallen in love with 2 years ago. Not the successful businessman or the overwhelmed new father, but the person underneath who was capable of joy when he allowed himself to feel it. 2 hours later, as they loaded the babies back into Adrian's car, he had traded his sports car for an SUV without being asked. Lena's phone rang. Lena Hart? This is Dr. Patricia Montgomery from Children's Hospital. I'm calling about your application for the marketing director position. Lena's heart jumped. The position at Children's Hospital would be perfect. Full-time with benefits, meaningful work, and a schedule that would allow for school pickup and sick days. She had interviewed 3 weeks ago but hadn't heard back. Yes, of course. I'm pleased to offer you the position. The salary is $68,000 annually, plus full medical and dental benefits. When would you be able to start? Lena felt Adrian's eyes on her as she processed the offer. Financial security, professional fulfillment, independence she hadn't had since the babies were born. That's wonderful news. Could I start in 2 weeks? I need to arrange childcare. Of course. I'll have HR send over the paperwork. Congratulations, Lena. We're excited to have you join the team. After hanging up, Lena realized her hands were shaking. Good news? Adrian asked, though something in his voice suggested he had already guessed. The job at Children's Hospital. They offered me the position. That's incredible. It's exactly what you wanted. Adrian knew how much this meant to her. The transition from freelance marketing work to a stable, full-time position with real benefits and job security. But instead of celebration, tension filled the car. Because both of them realized that Lena accepting a full-time job would complicate their tentative living arrangement significantly. $68,000, Lena said, mostly to herself. With benefits. I could actually support us properly, instead of scrambling for freelance contracts every month. You know money isn't an issue, right, for any of us? Lena looked at him sharply. It's an issue for me. Why? Because I need to know that I can take care of them myself if I have to. Because I need to know that my choices aren't dictated by financial dependence on you. Adrian was quiet for several blocks, processing this. You still don't trust me. I trust you with them, Lena said, gesturing toward the babies. But trusting you as a father and trusting you as a partner are different things. I'm not asking to be your partner. I'm asking to be their father and your co-parent. Those lines aren't as clear as you think they are. They were approaching Lena's neighborhood when Adrian's phone started buzzing insistently. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's David. Third call today. Take it, please. I know the Portland deal is important. Adrian hesitated, then answered on speaker. David. Thank God. Adrian, we have a serious problem. The Portland investors are pulling out. Completely. They're saying the lack of consistent leadership from our CEO indicates instability in the company. Lena saw Adrian's jaw tighten. What does that mean specifically? It means they think your recent absence suggests you're not fully committed to the expansion. They're concerned about investing $40 million in a company whose leadership seems distracted. I haven't been distracted, I've been delegating appropriately. Delegating or disappearing. Because from the outside, it looks like you've checked out right when we need you most. Adrian pulled into a parking space outside Lena's building and turned off the engine. In the back seat, Oliver had woken up and was making the soft sounds that meant he would need feeding soon. What do you need from me? Adrian asked. I need you to come to Portland tomorrow. Meet with the investors face-to-face, reassure them that you're still fully invested in Coal Renewable Energy's future. Lena watched Adrian's face as he weighed the request. Tomorrow was Saturday. They had planned to start moving her things to the Wallingford house to begin the process of becoming a real family. I can't tomorrow, Adrian said finally. Adrian, this is $40 million. This is the expansion that takes us national. This is everything we've been working toward. I understand that, but I have other priorities now. David's silence stretched uncomfortably long. Other priorities? Yes. Adrian, I'm going to ask you directly. Are you having some kind of personal crisis? Because if you are, we can work around it. Take some time, get whatever help you need. But don't tank the company because you're going through something. Lena reached over and gently touched Adrian's arm. Go, she whispered. The house will still be there next week. No, Adrian said firmly, both to David and to Lena. David, set up a video conference with the Portland investors. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I'll handle it remotely. A video call isn't going to. Then they weren't serious investors to begin with. Any company worth doing business with will understand that their CEO has a life outside the office. After hanging up, Adrian sat staring at the phone in his hands. You should go to Portland, Lena said quietly. I told you, I have other priorities. Adrian, look at me. He turned to face her, and Lena saw the conflict in his eyes. The man he used to be warring with the man he was trying to become. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she said gently. You're trying so hard to prove you're committed to being a father, that you're making choices that aren't sustainable. If you destroy your company trying to prove your devotion to us, you'll resent us eventually. That's not what's happening, isn't it? 3 weeks ago you told me that being Oliver and Emma's father would require restructuring your entire life. But restructuring doesn't mean abandoning. It means finding balance. Oliver's soft sounds had escalated to proper crying, and Emma was beginning to stir sympathetically. Lena got out to retrieve them, leaving Adrian alone with his thoughts and the sound of his children needing attention. When she returned with both babies, Adrian was staring at the house where they had planned to start their life together. Go to Portland, Lena said again. Show them that you're still the CEO they invested in. Show me that you can be a devoted father without sacrificing everything else that makes you who you are. And if I go, what does that mean for us? Lena looked at Oliver and Emma, both now calm in her arms, then back at Adrian. It means we figure out what a real partnership looks like. Not one where you overcompensate for past mistakes and not one where I'm afraid to ask for what I need. It means we start over, honestly this time. As Adrian drove away toward his own apartment to pack for Portland, Lena realized that their future together, whatever form it took, would depend not on grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but on their ability to build something sustainable from the complicated truth of who they actually were. The question was whether they were both brave enough to try. Adrian stood in the Portland Marriott conference room, looking out at the city's skyline while the investors reviewed his revised proposal. 18 hours ago, he had been planning to move boxes and set up a nursery. Now he was fighting to save the deal that would define his company's future. The irony wasn't lost on him. Mr. Cole, Margaret Chen, the lead investor, said, as the team finished their discussion, "We appreciate you coming on such short notice, but I have to be honest. We're concerned about the mixed signals we're receiving regarding your commitment to this expansion." "What kind of mixed signals?" 3 weeks ago, you were personally handling every detail of this negotiation. Then suddenly you're delegating everything, missing calls, rescheduling meetings. Yesterday, your business partner had to tell us you were unavailable due to personal matters. Adrian had prepared for this conversation during the flight to Portland. But sitting here now, facing the scrutiny of people who held his company's future in their hands, he realized he had a choice to make about which version of himself to present. The old Adrian would have manufactured an explanation that maintained his image as a completely dedicated CEO. The new Adrian, the father, the man trying to build something real with Lena and his children, didn't want to lie anymore. "You're right," he said simply. "My priorities have shifted recently." The silence in the room was immediate and uncomfortable. "Could you elaborate on that?" asked James Wong, another investor. Adrian thought about Oliver's tiny hand gripping his finger, about Emma's smile when she saw him walk through the door, about Lena's exhausted face as she managed 2 babies alone for months while he lived his uncomplicated life. "I'm a father," he said, "to 4-month-old twins I didn't know existed until a month ago. I'm learning what that means, and it's changed how I think about everything, including how I run my company." Margaret leaned forward. "That's not what we expected you to say. I'm not the same man who started these negotiations 6 months ago. I'm more focused, more efficient, and more committed to building something sustainable rather than something that requires me to sacrifice everything else that matters." "Mr. Cole," James interjected, "we're investing in coal renewable energy, not your personal journey of self-discovery. Actually, you're investing in me, in my judgment, my leadership, my ability to make decisions that serve the long-term interests of the company. And I'm telling you that becoming a father has made me a better leader, not a distracted one." Adrian stood and moved to the whiteboard, his confidence growing as he found his footing in this conversation. 6 months ago, I was working 18-hour days because I thought that's what success looked like. I was making every decision personally because I thought delegation was weakness. I was sacrificing my health, my relationships, and my perspective because I confused being busy with being effective. He began writing on the board: efficiency, sustainability, long-term thinking. Now I work 10-hour days and accomplish more because I'm forced to prioritize ruthlessly. I've delegated operational control to my senior team, and our productivity has increased by 23% because they're empowered to make decisions quickly instead of waiting for my approval. I'm thinking about legacy instead of just quarterly returns. Margaret was taking notes. "Those are interesting points, but how do we know this isn't temporary? How do we know that in 6 months you won't burn out trying to balance everything?" Adrian's phone buzzed with a text from Lena. "Oliver took his first bottle from someone other than me today. With my sister. He's growing up. How's Portland?" The message hit him with unexpected force. He was missing things. Right now, while he stood in this conference room defending his choices, his son was reaching small milestones that Adrian wouldn't witness. But instead of panic, Adrian felt clarity. "You don't know," he told the investors. "Just like I don't know if any of you will still be committed to renewable energy in 6 months when oil prices drop, or government subsidies change. What I can tell you is that I'm more motivated now than I've ever been to build something lasting, because it's not just about me anymore." He turned back to the whiteboard and wrote, "Purpose. Coal renewable energy isn't just my company anymore. It's my children's inheritance. It's the world I'm building for them to live in. Every decision I make now is filtered through the question, will this create the kind of future I want Oliver and Emma to inherit?" The room was quiet except for the scratch of pens on paper. "The Portland expansion isn't just about market share," Adrian continued. "It's about establishing clean energy infrastructure that will be serving communities when my children are adults. It's about building a company culture that values both excellence and humanity, because those are the values I want to model for them. Adrian's phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Lena. Emma sitting in her bouncy seat, grinning at something off camera while Oliver slept peacefully in the background. The image of his children, happy and safe while he was 300 miles away, filled him with an emotion he couldn't name. "Gentlemen, Ms. Chen," he said, putting his phone away without responding to the text. "I'm not asking you to invest in my personal transformation. I'm asking you to invest in a company led by someone who finally understands what success actually means." Margaret closed her notebook. "Mr. Cole, could you give us a few minutes to discuss this privately?" "Of course." Adrian stepped into the hallway, his heart pounding. He had either just secured the biggest deal in his company's history by being completely honest about his priorities, or he had destroyed everything by admitting that his attention was divided. His phone rang. Lena's name appeared on the screen. "How did it go?" she asked without preamble. "I told them about Oliver and Emma." "You what?" "I told them I'm a father, and that it's made me better at my job, not worse." Lena was quiet for a long moment. "How did they react?" "I don't know yet. They're discussing it now." "Adrian, I know it was risky, but I'm tired of pretending that caring about my family makes me less capable professionally. If they can't understand that, then they're not the right partners anyway. And if they walk away?" Adrian thought about the question seriously. 6 months ago, losing this deal would have felt like the end of the world. Now, standing in a hotel hallway 300 miles from his children, he realized that the end of the world would be losing them, not losing a business opportunity. Then we find other investors, ones who understand that the best leaders are the ones who have something meaningful to fight for. The conference room door opened, and Margaret gestured for him to return. "I have to go," Adrian told Lena. "But whatever happens here, I want you to know. This trip showed me that being away from you and the babies doesn't feel like freedom anymore. It feels like missing the most important parts of my life. Adrian, I love you," he said, the words surprising him even as he spoke them. "I love our children, and I love what we could build together if we're both brave enough to try." He hung up before she could respond and walked back into the conference room. The investors were smiling. "Mr. Cole," Margaret said, "we've decided to move forward with the investment, but with one condition." Adrian's heart stopped. "What condition?" "We want to meet your children," James said with a grin. "Any man who can turn fatherhood into a business philosophy this compelling probably has some pretty special kids." 3 hours later, Adrian was back on a plane to Seattle, contract signed, future secured. But more importantly, he was going home to a life that finally felt worth living. As the plane lifted off, Adrian realized that the most successful deal he had ever negotiated wasn't the one he had just signed in Portland. It was convincing himself that he deserved the love of a woman like Lena and children like Oliver and Emma. Now he just had to hope it wasn't too late to convince them of the same thing. 2 years later, the Saturday morning chaos in the Wallingford house was orchestrated pandemonium. Emma sat in her high chair, methodically throwing pieces of banana onto the kitchen floor while announcing, "No, no, no," with each toss. Oliver, meanwhile, had discovered that climbing onto the coffee table gave him the perfect vantage point to survey his kingdom, despite being told at least 50 times that tables were not for climbing. "Oliver James Cole, down," Lena called from the kitchen, where she was simultaneously packing diaper bags and trying to drink coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. "We've talked about this." Adrian appeared from upstairs, his hair still damp from the shower, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that somehow made him look younger than he had in any of his expensive suits. "I'll get him. Emma, beautiful girl, food goes in your mouth, not on the floor." Emma's response was to beam at her father and immediately throw another piece of banana, as if to demonstrate that she understood the rule, but found her way more entertaining. "She's testing boundaries," Lena observed, not without admiration. At 2 years old, Emma had developed a personality that was equal parts charm and determination, a combination that Adrian insisted she had inherited entirely from her mother. "She's going to be a CEO someday," Adrian said, lifting Oliver from the coffee table and redirecting him toward his toy cars. "The way she negotiates for extra stories at bedtime shows real leadership potential." "She's going to be whatever she wants to be," Lena corrected, but she was smiling. This was an ongoing joke between them. Adrian's tendency to see business acumen in every toddler behavior, Lena's insistence that their children be allowed to discover their own paths. The kitchen was larger than Lena's entire first apartment, but it felt cozy rather than grand. The island was covered with the debris of morning routine: sippy cups, Oliver's favorite stuffed elephant, Emma's hair clips, legal documents from Adrian's office that somehow always migrated to family spaces, and Lena's work laptop, which she used for her position as communications director at Children's Hospital. It was chaos, but it was their chaos. "Coffee," Adrian said, appearing at Lena's elbow with a fresh cup prepared exactly the way she liked it. "And before you say you don't have time, we have 45 minutes before we need to leave for the park. You don't have to manage my caffeine intake," Lena said, but she accepted the coffee gratefully. "I don't have to. I want to." It was a small distinction that had taken them months to navigate. The difference between Adrian trying to solve her problems and Adrian wanting to make her life easier, between control and care, between obligation and choice. The house around them told the story of how they had learned to blend their lives. Adrian's minimalist aesthetic had evolved to accommodate toy bins and colorful artwork. Lena's practical decorating had expanded to include a few pieces of art that served no purpose except beauty. The master bedroom they shared, after 6 months of careful, gradual progression from co-parenting roommates to something more, reflected both of their personalities without erasing either. "Daddy, up!" Oliver toddled over to Adrian, arms raised in the universal gesture of toddler demand. "Use your words, buddy. What do you want?" "Up, please, Daddy." Adrian lifted his son, who immediately began chattering in the mixture of real words and toddler language that somehow made perfect sense within the family, but would be incomprehensible to outsiders. Oliver had developed into an affectionate, energetic child who approached everything with enthusiasm, climbing, eating, playing, and especially talking to anyone who would listen. "He's telling you about the garbage truck," Lena translated. "He's been waiting all week for Saturday morning pickup." "Ah yes, the garbage truck. Very important business." Emma, having finished her banana-throwing experiment, began clapping and calling, "Mama, Mama," with the kind of urgency that suggested the world might end if her needs weren't immediately addressed. "I think someone wants to be cleaned up," Adrian observed. "I think someone wants attention," Lena corrected, but she moved to lift Emma from the high chair. "You just don't like being left out of the conversation, do you, sweet girl?" Emma's response was to wrap her arms around Lena's neck and plant a wet, banana-flavored kiss on her cheek, a gesture that never failed to melt any frustration about the morning's chaos. This was their routine now, structured but flexible, busy but not frantic. Adrian had learned to build his work schedule around school pickup and doctor appointments. Lena had learned to accept help without feeling like she was losing independence. Both had learned that building a family meant constant negotiation, frequent forgiveness, and daily choice to prioritize each other's happiness. "Your sister called," Adrian said, settling Oliver in his lap while Lena cleaned Emma's face. "She wants to know if we're still bringing the kids to her barbecue tomorrow." "Of course. Why wouldn't we be?" "Because last time Oliver tried to feed potato salad to her dog, and Emma had a complete meltdown when we tried to leave. That's what family barbecues are for. Chaos and meltdowns." Adrian smiled, remembering his anxiety during their first family gatherings. He had wanted the children to be perfectly behaved, had worried that any sign of normal toddler behavior would be seen as evidence that he was failing as a father. Lena had eventually convinced him that love meant accepting the full reality of who their children were, not trying to manage them into some ideal version. "Speaking of family," Lena said carefully, "your parents called yesterday. They want to visit next month." Adrian's relationship with his parents had evolved slowly and sometimes painfully over the past 2 years. Richard and Patricia Cole were not naturally demonstrative people, but they had made genuine efforts to understand their son's transformed priorities. Oliver and Emma had helped bridge the generational gap. It was hard to maintain emotional distance when faced with 2 toddlers who demanded interaction. Even Cassandra had reached out 6 months after Adrian and Lena began building their life together, not out of romantic interest but from genuine friendship. She had sent a beautiful photography book about families, with a note that said simply, "You found what you were really looking for. I'm happy for you." Adrian had appreciated her grace in understanding that their brief relationship had been exactly what he needed to realize what he actually wanted. "How long do they want to stay?" "A week. Your mother specifically requested time to teach Emma how to bake cookies. Emma is 2. Apparently your mother doesn't consider that a disqualification." Adrian laughed, imagining his elegant mother covered in flour while Emma helped in the kitchen. The image would have been impossible to conjure 2 years ago, but parenthood had changed everyone's definitions of what mattered. "Okay," he said. "A week it is." "Really?" You're not going to worry about work schedules and whether the house is clean enough. I've learned to worry about more important things, like whether he was setting a good example for Oliver about how to treat women, like whether Emma would grow up believing she could accomplish anything she set her mind to, like whether he and Lena were building the kind of marriage that would give their children security and teach them what love actually looked like. "What are you thinking about?" Lena asked, recognizing the expression Adrian wore when he was processing something significant. "Just this." Adrian gestured at the kitchen scene around them. 2 years ago, I thought success meant having complete control over my environment. Now I think success means thriving in chaos. Is that what we're doing? Thriving? Adrian looked around the room, at Emma babbling happily while playing with measuring spoons, at Oliver building elaborate structures with wooden blocks, at Lena moving through it all, with the kind of competent grace that made everything seem manageable, even when it shouldn't be. "Yeah," he said. "I think we are." The park trip was everything Adrian had learned to expect from family outings with toddlers. Delightful and exhausting in equal measure. Oliver approached the playground like he was conducting scientific research, testing every piece of equipment methodically. Emma made friends with every child she encountered, charming parents and siblings alike with her generous smiles and surprising vocabulary. Lena spread a blanket under an oak tree while Adrian pushed both children on the baby swings, marveling as he did every weekend at how much joy they could extract from something so simple. "Daddy, higher!" Oliver called. Swing," Emma added, not to be outdone by her brother's clear communication. "Higher and faster," Adrian confirmed, the two essential requests of childhood. From the blanket, Lena watched her family with the kind of contentment she had never imagined possible during those first lonely months of motherhood. Adrian had become the father she had hoped he might be, but hadn't dared expect, present, patient, endlessly interested in the small details of their children's development. But more than that, he had become a partner in the truest sense, someone who shared not just the pleasant moments, but the difficult ones. Someone who could handle a toddler meltdown in the grocery store without panic and who remembered which songs helped Emma fall asleep when she was teething. "Mama, look!" Emma called from the swing, having spotted a dog walking past the playground. "I see, baby. What a pretty dog." "Doggy," Oliver echoed, because at 2 years old he was convinced that any word Emma found important was worth repeating. Adrian lifted both children from the swings and guided them toward the blanket, where they immediately began exploring the snacks Lena had packed. Watching them share crackers, Oliver carefully breaking his in half to give Emma the bigger piece, Adrian felt the same sense of wonder that struck him regularly about the small people they were raising. "They're going to be okay," he said quietly, settling beside Lena on the blanket. "More than okay," Lena agreed. "They're going to be extraordinary, not because of anything we do specifically, just because of who they are." It was one of the hardest lessons of parenthood, learning to appreciate their children for themselves, rather than as extensions of parental hopes and fears. Oliver's cautious nature and Emma's bold curiosity were qualities to be nurtured, not problems to be solved. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't seen me that day?" Lena asked. "If you had just driven past without recognizing me?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "I think I would have figured it out eventually. Maybe not as quickly, and maybe not in time to be part of their early lives. But I think some part of me always knew that the life I was living wasn't complete." "You sound very confident for someone who spent a year convinced he didn't want children." "I wasn't convinced I didn't want children. I was convinced I would be terrible at being a father. There's a difference." "And now?" Adrian looked at Oliver, who was trying to feed crackers to a nearby squirrel, and Emma, who was attempting to braid grass with the serious concentration of someone performing delicate surgery. "Now I know that being terrible at something isn't the same as being incapable of learning to be good at it." The afternoon stretched lazily around them, filled with the sounds of children playing and the warm weight of sunshine through oak leaves. Other families dotted the park, some wrestling with similar toddler dynamics, others chasing older children on bikes, a few walking babies in strollers who still slept through most outdoor adventures. "I got offered a promotion," Lena said suddenly, the words coming out in a rush as if she had been holding them back. "What kind of promotion?" "Regional Communications Director. It would mean overseeing the communications departments for 3 different hospitals." Adrian turned to face her fully. "That's incredible. It's exactly what you wanted." "It would also mean more travel, maybe 1 week out of every month. We'll figure it out." "Just like that?" You don't need to think about logistics or childcare arrangements? Lena, you've supported my career through international conferences, emergency meetings, and weekend work sessions. Of course I'll support yours. It might mean hiring a nanny for backup childcare. Then we hire a nanny. It might mean you have to handle bedtime routines alone sometimes. Then I handle bedtime routines alone. Lena studied his face, looking for signs of the reluctance or resentment that she had learned to watch for in relationships. But Adrian's expression was genuinely supportive, not just willing to accommodate her career, but excited about it. When did you become so easygoing about sharing domestic responsibilities? She asked. When I realized that your success doesn't threaten mine. When I figured out that building a life together means both of us becoming the best versions of ourselves. Emma had abandoned the grass braiding project in favor of collecting acorns, which she was presenting to Oliver one at a time as if they were precious gifts. Oliver accepted each acorn solemnly, examining it carefully before placing it in the small pile they were building together. Look at them, Lena said softly. They're so good together. They're lucky to have each other. We all are. As the afternoon wound down and they packed up the remains of their picnic, Adrian realized that this ordinary Saturday at the park, was exactly what happiness looked like. Not the dramatic peaks he had once associated with success, but the steady rhythm of a life built with people who mattered. Ready to go home? He asked, lifting a sleepy Emma while Lena gathered a protesting Oliver. Home, Emma repeated drowsily, wrapping her arms around Adrian's neck. Home, Oliver echoed, though he was clearly disappointed to leave the acorns behind. As they walked toward the car, Adrian caught Lena's hand in his free one. Thank you, he said. For what? For seeing something in me that I didn't know was there. For giving me the chance to become the man I actually wanted to be. Lena squeezed his hand. Thank you for becoming him. The drive home was quiet, both children falling asleep in their car seats, within blocks of leaving the park. In the rearview mirror, Adrian could see their peaceful faces, flushed from sunshine and completely secure in the knowledge that they were safe and loved. At a red light, Lena reached over and touched Adrian's arm. Do you ever miss it? The life you had before? Adrian thought about the question seriously. Did he miss the freedom to make impulsive decisions? The simplicity of a life with no one else's needs to consider? The professional recognition that came from being completely devoted to work? No, he said finally, and meant it completely. I miss who I thought I was supposed to be, but I love who I actually am. The light turned green, and Adrian drove toward the house where his family was waiting to continue the quiet, ordinary, extraordinary business of loving each other through another day. Behind them, the park emptied, as other families headed home to their own versions of happiness, leaving only the playground equipment and the oak trees to stand witness to all the small moments of joy that had unfolded under the Seattle sky. Some stories end with dramatic declarations of love or grand gestures that change everything in a single moment. But this story ended the way the best love stories do, with the promise of countless ordinary days ahead, each one an opportunity to choose each other again. Looking back, would you have made the same choice Adrian did, restructuring your entire life for love and family, even when it meant giving up the independence and control you thought defined you? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.